Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is Tom Miller, the Creative Director at BayWa RE Solar Systems. We're going to get started now. Today, we have another lesson from the BayWa and Energy Circle's Digital Solar Marketing Educational Series. If you've missed any of the past lessons, and this will include a recording of this broadcast when we're done, you can find all of those articles, podcasts, and all that educational materials around this digital marketing series on our website at Solar Review magazine that we have online. So just go to BayWa, just Google BayWa distribution and you'll find us. So today your presenter is Peter Troast. He's the founder and CEO of Energy Circle, and Peter will be talking about current marketing intelligence in solar and how to leverage this intel to drive leads to your business. He'll talk about the latest intel post Q1 and how to start implementing it right away in Q2. So there's going to be a lot of great information in the next 45 minutes or so. If you have questions, please add them to the question box, and if they feel right during the point in Peter's presentation, I'll go ahead and ask him those questions. Otherwise, we'll save them to the end for Q&A. But Peter does like fielding questions on the go, so please feel free to do so. So that's my little intro, and Peter, why don't you take it away?
Great. Thank you very much, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today. And I'm excited to, talk about this. There's a lot going on, obviously, for everybody, and happy month of May. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, a few things that bubbled to the top for me in terms of what I think are pretty important right now. So here's the game plan. I wanted to talk first about messaging the tax credit step down, something that's obviously on everybody's mind, but I think some questions to discuss about how aggressively to be using that messaging. Secondly, just a little bit of an update on live chat. We've been talking a fair amount about this and the growing demand for it, in our view, from consumers. A lot of questions that I typically get are, well, if we were to implement this, what should I expect? So I've got a little bit of data for you on that. I just wanted to revisit briefly Google My Business and various elements of that, including our perspective on what the new standards are for reviews amongst solar installers. Many of you probably are aware that there was some recent changes with solar reviews in terms of exposing pricing information that they're getting from DOE, and so that's brand new. And just wanted to talk a little bit about both that, the whole question of transparency around pricing, and then also just the general sense that while many of us may be partnered with solar reviews and taking advantage of solar reviews, we also know that leads that come to us through solar reviews have a cost, and so we want to be mindful of competition with them. In addition to that, wanted to talk a little bit about what the state of Project Sunroof is, and how to optimize for that. And then lastly, a little bit on general calls to action and just what we're starting to see in the form of kind of web design and how people are approaching things. So that's the game plan. And as Tom said, I am more than happy to take questions as we go. So if anything I say prompts you, just feel free to chime in. So, all right. So let's start with the tax credit step down. And what I wanted to do with the next series of slides is just queue up the question of how aggressively and how in your face you want to be with this. I think Namaste's doing a pretty good job. Hey, I'm going to stop for just a second. Hey, Tom, I don't know if you can hear me, but a fair amount of background noise. I don't think it's me.
Okay, I'll go ahead and mute myself.
Okay. Oh, looks like that's better. Okay, good. Thanks, Tom. This example Namaste is using, which is, prominently on their page, insider tip, 2019 is the final year to receive the full 30%. solar system. Act now to secure your installation. So very, this is their home. This doesn't show necessarily in this slide, but this is their homepage. This is where it's at. And I think, here's another example where, you see, as you scroll down this particular page on SunPro, 30% tax credit is ending. SolarTrack, they've got a nice video in this particular case around the tax credit ending. Here's an example of using remarketing. So this is one of those ads that follows you around because you've already been to a website. So I would describe this one alert, 30% tax credit expires this year as pretty, as a fairly aggressive message. And I put these up more than anything just to pose the question. I don't have a right or wrong. I think this is a decision that everybody needs to make on their own as to how both prominent to have the tax credit messaging, and then how aggressive to be around, saying something like what you're seeing here, which is that it expires this year, which, for the average person out in the world, they're going to most likely interpret that as it going away in its entirety, not necessarily stepping down. And so this is where, obviously, we want to take advantage of it from an urgency standpoint, and yet at the same time not create a mess for ourselves starting in 2020 when people, if we create too much of an assumption that it completely went away. So, a couple other ways to message it. I thought, this was an especially strong message contained within a blog post for, the folks at Southern Energy Management. So just, a really good, really good and well written blog post, some quick facts, on the sideline. So a really good, a really good thing there. And, and again, just, this is an indication of, I just have found this one out there on the web of, somebody really playing it hard, right? It is the lead message with almost nothing else on their homepage around that. So, again, in the Q&A, we could potentially have some discussion about this. I think my takeaways from, is that I do believe it's an important part of the messaging that everybody ought to be making a statement about. I think the question on the table, which you can individually decide about, is how aggressively do you want to be, and how transparent about step down versus going away, et cetera. So it is that ever challenging balancing act between an urgent message and being kind of truthful. So that's topic one. I wanted to talk a little bit about live chat. As I said, I don't have a long section on this, but happy to talk to folks individually about what we're experiencing. But the big question that I've been getting from many people is what if you were to use live chat, and if you were to kind of make the decision to choose that as a means of communication, what could you expect? And first of all, one of the things that we're seeing, and this is an example of about 135 of the websites that we have full data access to across the Energy Circle system, looking at the split between the means by which people make contact with a company, either in the form of a web form versus a more immediate type of communication, such as the telephone and/or chat. And what you can see from the trend line here is that the trend line is pretty aggressively in favor of those phone and chat, those forms of instant gratification. So we're seeing that in solar, we're seeing that across HVAC, across insulation and home performance, pretty uniformly. And I think it's an indicator that people do when they sit down to kind of address the question of is solar right for me. They are looking for pretty quick answers. And so this is where I'm of the mind that first of all, it is best practice to offer up, to give people choice, right? To give the person on the other end a choice as to how they want to communicate with you as much as possible. And I think that chat increasingly is a powerful medium, one that delivers a stronger customer experience, one that is obviously very tailored to younger customers. And so here's an example of just, one solar contractor and kind of what you might expect in terms of the flow. And so in this particular case, these guys got 20 chat sessions in this particular month. That represented about somewhere in the range of 7 to 18% of their overall leads. And of those sessions, about 45% of them were real leads, people looking for a quote and looking for an install. And 55% in this case were questions, right? People more, not quite as far down the funnel as being ready for a quote or ready to buy, but had specific questions. And so that's, and you could, I'm sure it's, something in that kind of 50-50 split. We're seeing similar numbers in, elsewhere. So as you think about, chat and the possibility of implementing it, it's a little bit hard, obviously, to this is, if you can kind of see here, this is you can assume that this company's getting about 200 leads a month. So put that into your calculus as to how big your company is. But this is the kind of split. It is for someone who's good at the process of chat. You can dispatch those questions pretty easily and pretty quickly, and give a really good customer experience in that process, even though someone may just be kind of kicking tires, et cetera. So, and the other thing I just want to say about chat is that increasingly the software that's available, and there's all kinds of different options out there, increasingly have what are called bots, and that sounds very technical and confusing and complicated, and it really isn't. Think of it as more of a forking mechanism that is quite easy to set up. So, so you could imagine the first screen of a chat session being, are you here because you want to quote? Are you here because you have questions? Are you here for service on an existing system? And you can then start to fork people in that way and still give a really good, really efficient customer experience, answering their questions really rapidly, and yet getting them sort of down the funnel or down the process before a human being actually has to weigh in. There's a whole discussion about do you outsource the chat? Do you insource it? I'm in favor of the insourcing. I think I know people who have outsourced it and stand by that and believe in it. I also know folks who have tried it and felt like the experience just wasn't that good. Obviously, if the sole goal is to get an appointment, there's some outsourced opportunities that do that pretty well. Okay, Google My Business, and I think the growing importance of this. So when we talk about Google My Business, we're talking about the data within Google My Business that Google is increasingly displaying very prominently out in the world. And so this is an example of brand search. I went looking for Boston Solar in this particular case, and this is the page that you would get, right, when you do that. So the left is the organic results for the search term Boston Solar, and then the right-hand box that I've outlined in yellow is what's sort of Google's dancing around what they're calling this, either the business profile or it used to be called the knowledge panel. All of that information, most of that information is coming from your Google My Business profile. And so many people are calling this your second homepage. And as you'll see in just a second, we're seeing a growing number of actions coming from this page. And as you stand back and look at this page, the thing I want you to just think about as you go to look at your version of this for your company is the story that this page tells, because there is an extraordinary amount of information on this page, right? You see, in their particular case, you see star ratings from Facebook, Yelp, Guild Quality, Better Business Bureau, Glassdoor, all incredibly prominent right there on the page, and so you get a very, very specific picture. Not to mention, once you get into the knowledge panel, the 192 Google reviews for these guys, some snippets of their reviews, other review averages from Facebook and Guild Quality, Q&A, and various other things. And so there is a lot of information here. And the other thing I just would say about this is after years in the wilderness of trying to figure out what Google was doing with small local businesses, many of you may recall Google Places, and then they had this sort of adventure with Google Plus, which was their version of Facebook, and all small businesses got wrapped into that. This is really where they have landed as to how they are primarily going out after small local businesses, and they are investing in it, and it's constantly changing, and there's new features in it, and it looks like this is here to stay. And so of all the many things in the marketing realm that you have to think about, this is one that I think needs to be up on everybody's radar a bit more. Just to give you a little proof point on this idea that's your second homepage, and that's a place from which people can take lots of action. This is an example of one contractor, larger company, where we used a tracking number within their Google My Business for the Google My Business phone number, and in this case, over a quarter, 49% of all of their web-originated telephone calls came from that Google panel, from the Google My Business panel. And so proving the point that, so in other words, 49% of them came from there, and that many people never bothered to click through to the website. Now, caveats on this: it's a big company, it's got it's a well-known brand, they use a tracking number, and clearly a fair amount of that activity is just, what's their phone number? I'm trying to find it, and that's how you'd get to that page. But I would just point out that we are seeing a growing amount of interaction with companies coming, from this particular brand search page before ever clicking through to a website. Not saying that websites aren't critically important, they still are, but this page is really important too. I think, I suspect a lot of folks on this call are aware of this, but if I still continue to see, as we in the day in and day out of evaluating solar companies out there, for the longest time, up until sometime in last year, the only category that really existed inside of solar was the first one on this list, solar energy equipment supplier. Last year, they added solar energy company and solar energy contractor, as well as solar hot water system supplier and photovoltaic power plant and so forth. We see so many companies still using solar energy equipment supplier. I'm not saying it's bad. The key thing to know about this, and I'll go back to this picture just so you can see, if you zoom in, right here, if you can see my cursor right under the stars, is the place where the primary listing inside of your Google My Business. In other words, and when I say primary, I mean the category in which you put in the first position. There's 10 positions in total. The one you put first is the one that shows up. And we have a pretty strong recommendation to choose one of the two, either solar energy company or solar energy contractor. We're doing some we're trying to do some testing on this and gather some data as to whether or not we can identify which of the two is best. We don't have that answer yet. I think both of them are better than solar energy equipment supplier. I tend to lean towards contractor for those of you who are, in installers, because it does infer that this is the place to come to get the get an installation done. Also in Google My Business is the our Google reviews, and so our view is that the quantity. Well, I guess first of all, let me say it is a known fact, known ranking factor that this applies to where you rank in local search, that the number of reviews in Google is a key factor for that. And it's interesting that it doesn't have much to do with quality. It really has to do with quantity as much as anything else. And so as we look across solar and as well as these other industries that you can see here, the ante is really up in terms of what those quantities ought to be. And so our view at the moment and is that 75 is a good goal. This is tricky, right? I'm sure there's folks on this call that might be in the category, smaller companies that are less than 10. There's many companies here that are, you saw Boston Solar, that it's almost, approaching 200. So there's a very, very wide range in terms of what's going on. But, taken all in as an industry, our view is that 75 is about the goal, and that's just in Google. So they're just Google reviews. Now the one that may seem intimidating and kind of a pain. The one thing that I would just add to this is that there's almost no other review site where quantity matters, except to the extent that it affects your review average, right? So if you quantity matters only on Yelp, for example, if you need quantity in order to make sure that your review average is where it needs to be. But other than that, generally speaking, it's not all that relevant from a ranking factor or from a traffic factor. Yelp is very regional, right, as to how important it is. It appears everywhere, but there are certain parts of the country, California being prominent, where Yelp is it really contributes a lot of traffic, and you might say in that case. So, but for Google, our guidance is about 75 reviews. One other thing that is really pretty interesting inside of that Google My Business are what are called Google Posts. These are, you could think of them as like a Facebook post. You can do virtually anything. They have an expiration date. We have some evidence that they are resulting in both in ranking boosts for overall websites. But they're pretty easy to do, and the thing about them is you can do anything. I mean, it could be a blog post link, as is the case in this particular example, but you can put up just a little graphic of an award or a promotion, or what we just talked about earlier. This would be a good place to put something in there about the tax credit step down, and an urgency message. You can just copy a recent positive review that you've received and put it in a graphic and stick it here. So it's got lots and lots of flexibility, but we're big fans of using it. All right, so let's talk about solar reviews. Many of you literally yesterday may have gotten this email, which indicates that Solar Reviews is starting to display average system cost and a lowest system cost or pricing, I should say, for installers that are partners inside of Solar Reviews. And there's a long explanation that I don't 100% buy here in terms of their need to do so from a search engine optimization standpoint. The key thing is they are getting the information from DOE, and it's in there. Now, what's really important, if you look down at the bottom of this, is you can provide your own data besides, beyond what they did. And I would, based on what I have been seeing, in other words, so the data being the year in business, and then your average 8 kW system and your lowest kW system. So so that you have that choice now, and I would recommend probably using that. This is what it looks like when you find one, and the skew that you see here to high prices. So look at Tesla Solar City at average at $5.09 a watt, Vivint at average at $4.47 a watt. Almost everything that I have seen as I have been surfing around is skewed that high. So and it's pretty rare that you see a spread like you see in Vivint's case from $1.98 to $4.47. So check yours, see if they've gathered some data, and make sure to do that. One of the things that this, if you go back to this email that they wrote, their competitors, and I don't really know what they mean by that. They're probably talking primarily about Energy Sage, and then Solar Estimates, which is their company, right? That's a Solar Reviews family company. When we look in search as to who tends to appear prominently, those are the ones that kind of compete with each other in search, even though the Solar Reviews and Solar Estimates are the same people. Whether or not there's validity to the fact that the presence of pricing information is causing a boost, I can't speak to the truth of that or the validity of that yet. But what I would just suggest people think about, if pricing is becoming more transparent out in the world through systems like Solar Reviews and various other places, does it make sense to tackle that head on and have some kind of a similar thing on your own website? And I know not many people tend to do that. I know there's you have to caveat it 100 different ways for various complications and so forth, but one of the things we absolutely do know, of all the top questions that get asked in solar, pricing-related questions, cost-related questions tend to be very, very high in terms of the number of questions that are getting asked. So that's a little food for thought on that. At the same time, as long as we're talking about solar reviews, what is pretty universally true is that Solar Reviews always tends to rank prominently, typically either second after your website or third after your website. And so like I said before, if you are signed up with them, you're paying them for leads, you really would rather have the click go to Namaste in this particular case, or to Namaste's Facebook page or anywhere else other than that Solar Reviews click, because that is going to have a cost on it. So I know everybody that we work with, most people tend to have a relationship with Solar Reviews and they do it, but they, it is this sort of, catch, there's a compromise to be had here. The success of it, showing in this case 4.8 average over 416 reviews, super impressive, but you're paying for that lead. And so a couple strategies for how to make sure that you are trying to win that traffic relative to them, right? No harm done to just try to be winning against them. One is to get Sitelinks. So you see those 6 listings that are underneath the listing here in the case of InSource. That takes up a lot of real estate, pushes everything else down in the page. Being active in Facebook tends to move Facebook up. Vaughn in this particular case is really good at Facebook and natural at Facebook, and consequently has a lot of engagement on Facebook. So because of his level of activity, it tends to rank highly. Having a YouTube channel, and you get a sense here. Look at how much real estate that YouTube, that section of carousel of YouTube videos takes up here. And so you'll notice in this case, some of these are the YouTube channel for them, and some of it's Facebook, and some of it's various other things. But getting the trigger for this tends to be having the YouTube channel in the first place, being active about it. And it's no guarantee that it's going to show up, but we've been able to do that, and it takes up a lot of real estate and pushes things down. Same thing with Yelp. Again, more activity in Yelp tends to bump it up. You see here in this particular case of a California installer, Yelp is on the is second to their website, and Solar Reviews is third. If you have multiple locations, and obviously don't fake this if you don't, but if you have multiple locations, you would also have multiple Google My Business pages. And so this is a situation where essentially a version of the local pack for those two locations will insert into that brand listing and again, take up a whole lot of real estate and push everything else down. So those are a few recommendations for that. And again, I don't want to paint Solar Reviews as the bogeyman in any way, but it is better. They in some senses are after your traffic, and what I want to stand for, if I were your marketing firm, I want to stand for getting that traffic directly to you as quickly as possible. And so that's how that works. Okay. Project Sunroof. So Project Sunroof, as we all kind of know, is still out there. I think everyone is aware of the fact that for a long period of time, Google was monetizing this. So in other words, when someone went through the process of putting their address in and getting some quotes, and then it would tee up some, at the time, it was a very select group of quite national solar companies as well as solar aggregators, lead aggregators. And they were at that point selling those leads. And at some point in the process, for Lord knows why, Google decided to stop monetizing. And consequently, what happens when you go through this process is that you go through the process and you get a result for that once you get through it. And well, I'll get to that in just a second. We've been looking hard at which keywords trigger Project Sunroof and which don't. And so the ones that do tend to be the ones that are about panels, about PV, about solar savings, about solar power, solar energy, a lot of the, solar for home. And yet the terms that are more focused on the business side of it, the looking for a contractor, do not trigger it. So solar contractor, solar installer, surprisingly solar costs, you think that would be perfect, but in our recent testing, we have not been seeing Sunroof come up. Solar company, solar firm, solar businesses, solar provider are not generating it. But anything that is on the sort of left side of this we have seen it triggering Sunroof. So what happens though, since they stopped the process of monetizing it, is they give you this data. This is what the outcome would look like. And at the very bottom, you see they provide a link, which is to search for solar providers near you. And so the advice that we are suggesting here is to optimize for solar provider, right? So and it's a little bit of an odd term, right? Many of us tend, if you were to meet somebody at, walking the dog and they ask you what you do, I don't know that many people that say I'm a solar provider, right? Most people say I'm a solar installer, I'm a solar contractor. So solar provider is a little bit of an obscure term, and yet it is the term that Google is using universally when they spit people out of Sunroof. So that's number one, is, be mindful of the search term solar provider, and don't worry too much about near me. I mean, the near me thing is based on proximity, and it's a terrible way for Google to rank who is the best company to queue up based on how close a service business is to where you're physically searching from. This, by the way, this particular search you're seeing on the right is from my office in downtown Portland, Maine. I get the 3 companies that are the closest to me, and so not hugely relevant, just the fact that their office is close to me, but that's a whole kind of separate issue. Secondly, you want to so solar provider, having some solar provider language on your website, using it selectively in some of your titles and descriptions for metadata is a good idea. Don't stress too hard, and certainly do not if you don't go through your website and find every instance of solar installer and change it to solar provider, right? Google's, they're smart, and the algorithm is smart enough to, know that a installer is a provider, but we are seeing some success when we do a little bit of optimization for the term provider based on this. The second thing is just do all the things you need to do to optimize for where how you rank in the local pack. The local pack is that, listing you see there of 3. That's, star ratings is very important to that, and a variety of other kind of factors, the quantity of Google reviews we just talked about. So everything you would normally be doing to optimize for the local pack, which is a whole separate discussion, would help in this particular case. All right. The last thing I wanted to just talk about is, this is a little bit of a design discussion here, and just starting to see both what the industry is doing as a whole, as well as kind of what we're seeing be successful. And generally, and what I'm talking about here is where in the website design do you place your core calls to action? And so this, for many of us, get a free solar quote is the primary call to action. State the words however you choose to state them. But what we are seeing more and more, and what we are seeing be successful, is to be fairly aggressive about it. Had lots of conversations with people, that we are, building websites for, that say, I don't want to be that aggressive. And again, this isn't dictating, other than just to say, this is what I'm seeing in the industry, and this is what is going on. So this is one format where you just have you have a form thing. You see the telephone number is there. In this particular case, this is the company not using chat. Here's an example, back to Boston, and just there, first of all, the lower part of the page, right? So right below their hero image is the primary form to get that information. But where you see these other arrows at the top of the page, there's just, everywhere you go, you either see free quote, it's up there in the utility navigation in the far upper right. When you mouse over residential solar or any of the other primary navigation items here, you see free quote being the kind of first thing that is there as a thing. You see contact us there. So many ways that no one's gonna be wondering what do I need to do, or how do I go to contact this company. This is Namaste's. We saw it earlier. I just put it in the context of what the entire page looks like. It is the lead message, and again, I know some people feel that this is overly aggressive, and yet I think if you read the copy, which I've always admired, in the case of Namaste, we help you capture the money-saving benefits of solar, and then putting right up there the questions that we know everybody has on their minds. Is solar right for you? Will it work on your roof? How much is it going to cost? How much am I going to save? Fill out these forms and we'll get you started. So again, while this might be aggressive from a real estate standpoint and where it's located, it is softened, I think, by the benefits that they're offering in terms of what they're going to get. Just point out that there's lots of routes up the mountain, so you can still be prominent and not necessarily have to sacrifice your central messaging block there, or central messaging panel, so you can drop it down into a situation like this. The other thing that I want to point out in the context of this discussion about calls to action and prominence of calls to action is how important relevance is to accomplishing strong conversion. And just, conversion is, you got 100 visits to this page, how many people took the time to call that number and or fill out that form. And so when the call to action can be relevant to the page you're on, in this case, it's a battery storage thing, so store the sun's power with Tesla. This is a Powerwall dealer. Our battery backup systems will help you boost efficiency. So use whatever message you want, but when, rather than having a single generic call to action across an entire website, being specific to the page you're on is very helpful and boosts things. So let me stop there, and would love to take any questions. I've said a few things that might be controversial, so certainly more than welcome anybody's comments or thoughts on on messaging the step down question, on the solar reviews issues. Everything's on the table. Tom, I guess I'm looking to you on
yeah. We have one comment that says it's very helpful so far.
Good, thank you.
Peter, I have a question about, we do have a question coming in. Let me see. Please, could you tell me again where to put Google posts?
Yeah, so you would add them from within your Google My Business dashboard. So if you go, if you log into your Google My Business, that's the place where you can do it. And one thing to know is that the actual placement of it within that rectangle that is the knowledge panel keeps changing. You don't have any control over it. You can't say I want it here. Google has been moving it around, and so we don't have any control over that. But getting it in there and keeping it up is done through your Google My Business dashboard.
Right. And Peter, I have a question. I've noticed that when you do post, those photographs become part of your business's identity online. So they might be related photos that come up when people search for your company. Is there any thinking that goes behind what photos to post or not?
Good. Yeah, great question, Tom. Well, I think that so you're pointing out something that is a truism increasingly, is that photography is more important, not just for the images that are in it, but because Google is using it, so much more prominently. So I think our view is just emphasize images that have quality, right? And so more often than not, it's a good-looking install that is the kind of image you want. But at the same time, you may want to mix it up. So I think I always, related to this point is you can put photographs in Google My Business as well. I didn't touch on that. And once again, there's always a lead image that is the most prominent on that page. And I'd be very mindful of whether, that lead image and whether it's good. If you don't do anything, sometimes you get the Google little, what do they call, the Google car that goes by and takes pictures, Street View. So sometimes that image will show up first if you don't put anything in there yourself. So I would control that, and then I would think, think of the photographs as telling the story of your company. So if you want to emphasize your people, having, some of those shots would be good. Maybe some people on an install. I think, something that's not directly related to this, but one of the other things that is increasingly prominent in solar is the use of drone footage, as a way of, sort of both, having dynamic content on a website, as well as being a fantastic proof point of the kinds of jobs that you've worked on, particularly if you have any kind of sophisticated commercial jobs.
Right. And I have another question related to that, but let's move on and we can circle back later. We've got another question from Emily. She asks, do the project sunroof estimates seem accurate?
That's a great question. It was funny because I just was thinking about this earlier. I should probably do a little bit more homework on that. I did it recently actually for our office, which is which would be a very good, and it seemed quite low to me. So that's only one sort of anecdotal data point, and maybe some other folks, have some thoughts about that. It's a little unclear to me, like what's going on in the background in terms of the algorithm, but the example of one seemed low.
Right. And that's the kind of question that we can post to our LinkedIn group, which we'll talk about at the end. We have another question from Jason. What is the most reliable end user pricing database and why is it the most reliable?
Oh boy. I'm probably not qualified to answer that accurately. My understanding is that the DOE pricing database is sourced from the individual utility in the area. And so my guess is, I would speculate that the accuracy of that information is entirely dependent on the quality of that utility and maybe the bias of that utility. So I think that's I guess for that piece, that's my answer. But like I said, and the reason I brought that up with the solar reviews thing is at least they're giving you the opportunity to put your own, to choose your own data versus necessarily having to rely on whatever database of whatever accuracy.
Great. Okay, moving on. This is a long one from Victoria. Do you have any stats on prominent call to action? I'd like to convince the person in charge of the website to have a more aggressive call to action campaign, but as you said, they don't want to push it and think of it almost like a funnel that causes only serious people to contact us.
Well, what I would encourage Victoria to do in that case is not uniformly make the decision, but maybe try some A/B testing, right? And so A/B testing is, test sending half the traffic to a more prominent version of it, and send half the traffic to maybe the existing one as the benchmark, and test it in your particular situation as to whether or not that would be a significant boost. So, I think I'm trying to think of whether we do have a lot of data, and I would be happy, if you want to follow up with me. You see my email is on this particular slide. If you want to follow up with me, I'd be happy to take a look at the site you're talking about, and then I can talk with my crew about whether they have some before and after situations where maybe there's a situation where we've got something similar to what you have now, and then it became more aggressive. So I guess that's my quick thought, but it's so contextual, I think, that I'd love to take a look at yours and see how that looks.
Right. Great. We have a question about reviews. Any strategies for how to drum up a lot more reviews? ? Just ask old clients? ?
Yeah, great question. So our experience is that, well, first of all, the batting average in asking for reviews, generally speaking, is pretty low, right? So when you ask 10 people, your chances of getting one is that would be high. Ask 100 people, and your chance of getting 5 would be probably more the expectation. So generally speaking, set the expectations that it's a low percentage game. The ways to boost that percentage the most are to ask at as close to the completion of the job as possible, and to have the crew or the crew lead, whoever was on site for the install, to make the request and make it a slightly personal request. So, and so I fully realize there's all this kind of complexity of, do you ask at the completion of the install? Do you ask at the, at the true up? Do you ask when the, when the utility connection gets made? There's a lot of those things. But the key point is, I think, best practices is if it's a personal request by someone on site, that tends to work best. And then I would say as close to the completion of the job as possible. So that's it. And so clearly there is, we all have to go mine our past customers if we're trying to do something. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying set your expectations fairly clearly. One other thing I would just mention in this context is that we use systems that both use email as the primary the primary request mechanism, but we're also using chat, and so or excuse me, texting, live text, not live text, just text, right? So we do tend to see a higher response rate when the request gets made via a text relative to an email. And once again, this is tied, especially strong when it's tied to a personal request. So there's a software program out there called Podium that some of our clients use. Podium is text-based. It's got an app, and so somebody on site says, "Would you be willing to write us a review?" Yes. Okay. Let me text you the link. Okay. And so, Podium's not cheap, but it definitely does work, and it does give you that level of boost. I hope it's obvious. You can set it for what to ask for. If usually we have the feeling that you've got one shot at the apple. If, people are going to write you a review at one place. And so sometimes you might set that link to be, okay, here's our solar reviews link, and here's our Google link, and here's our Yelp link. In some cases, you might say, we're focused on Google. Would you write us a Google review? And then that link is purely set to that. So great question, big topic. Hopefully I didn't overly complicate that answer.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. If I just add, just make it a part of your process. Put it, as a check to the box when you're doing an installation. Make sure you're following up somehow, and you have a record of that. The other thing I would add for the Google reviews is make sure you're sending a person a request via email or text or however to the correct review, which is a link that you need to make sure is correct. Just make it easy for people to leave a review, and you're going to have a specific link that will link to your business in Google Maps, which is related to the Google My Business. So just try to make it as easy as possible for people. Quick update from Emily regarding the Project Sunroof. She thinks that they're very low as well. So that's some feedback from Emily. And that's the end of our questions here. Peter, do you have anything else to add? I had one more thought about, it was about the Google My Business, going back to that. Do you see any negative in reposting similar content that you do to Facebook to the Google My Business? So it seems to me like they're trying to treat that kind of like a feed, a social media feed. Are there any negatives to just reposting content there that you posted on other social platforms?
No, I don't think so. And also because they have such a short life, right? I think it's, it sounds like there's some ways to get around the 7-day lifespan of those Google posts. So I don't think it's the end of the world if you recirculate some things through. But I don't see any indication that there's a worry that putting the same thing on Facebook versus a Google post is causing any challenges. The Google is seeing all the content inside, as long as that's not just a straight image. And so, just be mindful of the fact that in its mysterious ways of, crawling everything in the world, right? the content that you put into those posts is relevant, and so the more it can be keyworded and towards the things you like, and the more of that can happen, I think the better. Let me just add one other thing, because there's another feature in Google My Business which I didn't talk about in the interest of time today, but it's called Questions and Answers, and anybody can ask a question and anybody can ask an answer, and in this discussion about content that matters to Google, we're starting to see that the question and answer content is really relevant too. It's okay. Well, first of all, monitor it, because, gosh, I saw one recently of somebody that actually it was a client asking about hail damage to their panels and did they need to turn their system off, like it was like a pretty urgent situation. And it was just a question that was hanging out there. Nobody knew it was there. So that can happen. But you also can ask yourself questions. It's okay to go in and just, queue up some of your frequently asked questions, ask and answer them, and that gives some richness to that information as well.
Yeah, great. So that is it. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Peter, or whether we should wrap up a couple minutes early.
No, that's great questions, everybody. Thanks very much, and feel free to, if anything burning on your minds that's more individual, feel free to email me.
Yeah, great. And I'll just add that we'll send out a follow-up email with links to all the content from this entire marketing educational series that you could that you could read on our website. And then we also have a LinkedIn. It's called the Educational Mastermind Group for Solar Marketing, and you can connect directly with Peter on that LinkedIn group and then ask other people questions as well. So yeah, that's it. Thank you, everybody, and we look forward to hosting the next one. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Thanks, everyone.
All right, bye.